Hey guys, welcome to another video and thanks for clicking on this one. In this video, let's talk about what you should know about your medical certificate or the medical standards. I think it's better to call it that because most of the time I get questions from people who ask, I have this condition, can I become a pilot? Or I have this medical situation going on and I'm worried about my medical being denied. So I get those questions often, and most of the time what I would say is, the best thing you can do is to go talk to an aviation medical expert or examiner who is able to tell you exactly what the standards are. But there's something that you can do well in advance, and that is maybe do some research. So to point you in the right directions, I've actually pulled up some of the medical standards for the United States. Now, you have to understand that some other parts of the country will use certain standards that are slightly different or have certain requirements. But this information that you have here is generally a baseline to get started with. All right. So if you're new here, welcome. If you're a returning subscriber, please don't forget to drop a like on the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, all of that stuff. OK, now, the first thing I'd like to start with is, before you start your flight training or before you start pursuing all these cadet programs that I talk about, a scholarship program, a lot of times you will find yourself in this phase where you ask yourself, should I get my medical first? Because if I get my medical, maybe I'm a step ahead and that will give you the advantage that you need to secure the scholarship or the cadet program, or even just move smoothly into your training, flight training to be specific. And honestly, it all depends on the situation. It all depends on where you are, the resources you have available to you, and what your current medical situation is. And the reason why I say this is, let's assume that you are someone who's dealing with certain maybe sight or eyesight problems, right? Not just because you wear glasses. Keep that in mind, because if you wear glasses, that doesn't prevent you or won't stop you from becoming a pilot. Remember that. But there are certain situations where maybe you struggle with color, or maybe you have something going on with your sight. Then absolutely, you're asking the right question. You probably want to get your medical certificate first before you start to invest in training or any of these cadet programs and the likes. On the other hand, if you have a perfect eyesight and nothing is going on, and of course you feel normal, there's nothing abnormal going on, then I wouldn't really worry too much about that. And the reason why I say I won't worry too much is because for most part, any medical situation that is, a little worrisome will show itself. Like, if it's troubling you, though, if it's bothering you, then it's something that you probably want to get checked out right away, right? I mean, just for any medical situation that you may have. But considering you're going to invest, thousands and time, money into training, it could be wise to spend some extra, money to get a medical certificate done first before you commit to this. Now, I'm not saying that you should or is necessary for you to do this. I'm just saying that it could help. It could put your mind at ease knowing that you have nothing to worry about when it comes to medical, at least at the time of initiating your training, or at least commencing your training. So why am I saying this though? Let me give you some background to this. As a flight instructor who, trained for years and also mentored people right in the process of becoming a pilot, one thing that I've seen those who chose to do their medical first before they start to invest in training, especially for those who are international students who are then required to maybe put down a lot of money to start training, and of course visa, traveling, accommodation, all of that stuff in a new country to get established and get started with training. That commitment alone pushes them to get a medical certificate first before commencing that training or before investing that amount of money. So it is wise to do that. But here are the challenges that I've seen. For those who choose to do that first, they often either find themselves in areas where they are unable to find FAA certified medical examiners, or they find themselves having to get a medical certificate that isn't recognized by the FAA, and then they have to do the FAA again. So it's like you're paying twice. I've seen those situations. Now, if you have a FAA certified medical examiner in your region, in your country, and you can pay the money that is required for you to pay, then perfect. I would say go ahead and do that first. But not everybody have access to an FAA certified medical examiner, and that always puts a wrench in the process, because I have seen someone who actually flew out of their country to the US to get an FAA medical examiner, do the examination, and then go back. And you have to remember that sometimes this examination that you do only takes 20 minutes at most, right? Because they check your eyes, they check your hearing, check your heart rate, your lungs, your body, and literally you're done. And in the US, you generally don't have backlog of people waiting, so you can sign up today and tomorrow get your medical done for most places, unless they are backed up. But that is rare. I mean, I know in the UK sometimes you do have to wait like 6 months. I've heard that. But in the US, you can literally walk in and get your medical certificate the same day. That is how easy it can be here. And when I say easy, I mean you still get checked out, but it's just that you don't have this backlog, and it's not as expensive. The process is not complicated, and you have a medical examiner almost in every city. FAA certified medical examiner in every city in the US. So I've seen somebody do that who actually flew out of their country. So you can think about the cost of doing that, as accommodation for a few weeks or a few days actually, and then flew back, then commence their training, or to commence the process of starting training or applying and all that. So I've seen people do those things, and honestly, it sometimes can be it's a good process, it's a good initiative to take, but sometimes can get too expensive in the process. So make sure that you do your own due diligence. If you have an FAA medical examiner around you, I would say go ahead and do it. If you don't have a FAA medical examiner, a general medical checkup just to check everything about you will sometimes suffice, even though you wouldn't get an FAA certificate or medical certificate with you that day because you're just doing a general medical checkup. But the point here is, if there are some things to be worried about, then at that point, I would say maybe escalate to looking for an FAA certified medical examiner. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So that is my first recommendation in this process. If you have perfect hearts and perfect blood pressure, blood sugar, eyesight, and everything is okay, then I wouldn't worry about going to the FAA medical examiner, because to be honest with you, if your medical history is actually solid, you shouldn't have to worry about getting your FAA medical exam certificate. It shouldn't be a problem. I hope that makes sense. I think I've spent so much time on that because that is the key thing that I want you to understand. Now, if you have certain conditions that you believe could prevent you from getting your FAA certificate or medical certificate, then we can talk about some of these things. And I'm going to rush through this. You have to remember that there are generally 3 classes of FAA medical certificates you can get. You have first class, second class, and third class. For the purposes of this video, I'm focusing on just the first class because for most airlines in the US, you generally have to have a first class. Although some of them you can use a second class, but you cannot be a PIC on that airplane. But for this video, I am going to just stick to the first class stuff. All right. So this is on part 67, and this is on the website. If you go to ecfr.gov and you just put in the title 14, you can actually find all this information. Or even just do a Google search of part 67 medical standards and certification, you will come across this. Now, here's something that I want you to put in mind, to keep in mind. Okay. If you go to first class Airman Medical Certificate eligibility, to be eligible for a first class medical certificate and to remain eligible for a first class Airman Medical Certificate, a person must meet the requirements of this subpart I. All right, so it breaks it into different sections. You have your eye, you have the hair, nose, throat, and equilibrium. You have the mental, you have the neurologic, you have the cardiovascular and general medical condition. Okay, so if you read all these areas, which I'm not going to go into details, but one big part that I always get every time is, oh, I wear glasses. How can I be a pilot? Or I worry about my eyesight. Hey, it says it here. Distant visual acuity of 20/20 or better in each eye separately with or without corrective lenses. So you can see with or without corrective lenses If corrective lenses are necessary for 20/20 vision, the person may be eligible only on the condition that the corrective lenses are worn while exercising the privileges of an airman certificate. This is a question I get asked almost every time. Oh, I wear glasses. Oh, you wear glasses. How come you're a pilot? Well, it's right here. As long as you can have 20/20 with corrective lenses, you may be issued a certificate based on the requirement that you wear it when you're exercising the privileges of that certificate. Okay. The next thing is, and then it talks about some conditions that you shouldn't have, or, that you should keep in mind that a medical person can look into. Again, I'm not a doctor. I am not going to go into all of this stuff. But the point here is, a normal eyesight would work. And then you have the ear, throat, nose, throat, and equilibrium as well. And it talks about how much you should hear, how well you should hear, the sound, all this stuff. Okay. These are all sound frequencies and how well you should be able to hear them. Then you have the mental. Okay. And of course, there are some things that will disqualify you. Again, you can pause this video to take a quick look at it, or you can just go on Google us yourself to see, of course, if you're substance dependent, that's going to be a problem. You have things like substance abuse, substance dependence, except where there's established clinical evidence, such as to the FAA surgeon, or recovery, including sustained total abstinence from the substances for not less than the preceding 2 years. All right. So this is something that sometimes people get in trouble with. Alcohol is definitely a big one. You don't want to have something on your record when it comes to alcohol, especially like things like DUI, DWI, or I think it's DWI, right? Anyway, things like that you have to be very cautious about. No substance abuse within the preceding 2 years. That's always a big one. Okay. And of course, you have the neurologic part as well. So things like epilepsy, a disturbance of consciousness without satisfactory medical explanation. So somebody fainting, dizzying, things like that, right? Transient loss of control of nervous system. Those things are things that you definitely don't want to have going on. Okay. So if you have any of these things, then we need to worry. I hope this is making sense to you guys. If you have any of these conditions, so no other seizure disturbance, no other seizure disorder, disturbance of consciousness, neurologic condition that the federal air surgeon, based on the case history, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to read all of this. I don't want to waste time on that. But the point here is, if you look into this and you have any of these conditions going on, then I am going to worry. Then I would say you definitely want to see a medical person before you even start your training, before you even start investing at all. You want to reach into somebody who's an expert, an FAA. If you are in the UK, then of course you look into the CAA, EASA medical person out there. In other parts of the country, on a part of the world, you probably want to reach out to the authority that governs the medical issuance of medical certificates in that country. But these are generally the areas that you want to worry about. For example, your cardiovascular health, you have angina pectoris, I can't even say that, myocardial infarction. These are all heart-related stuff. Any of these things will require that you go the extra step, extra mile of getting a medical issued. And again, like I said, I'm not an AME, but I wanted to point you in the right direction. I think I missed something that I want to cover real quick. General medical condition. Remember what I said earlier, that, if you are in a situation where you feel like there's something going on, you're not sure, this tells you what you should look into. Since the general medical standards for a first-class airman medical certificate are no established medical history or clinical diagnosis of diabetes mellitus that requires insulin or other hypoglycemic drug for control. And again, you can read the rest of it, okay? But the point here is, if you have any of these things that I've just covered and you feel, maybe I need to get more clarification, then it's best that you reach out to a medical professional, or at least an FAA medical professional if you're in the US, or if you're planning to train in the US. Otherwise, if you're in a perfect health and there's nothing really crazy going on, then I would say that you shouldn't worry. There's no, in my opinion, majority of the people who come over to start training or start their training generally don't have any issues most of the time, because if there's an issue going on, then it would have been flagged sooner, or at least early in the process. However, I also know that some people develop conditions over time. So it's also important that you take care of yourself, especially things like substance abuse or substance dependence. Those are things that sometimes could put a wrench, or at least put a dent in your training or even your career. So that is why if you need help, always seek help. If there's something going on mentally, then always take the time to seek professional help in this. There are so many organizations out there. Always reach out for help. I thought I should share this information for those of you who may be looking into this kind of questions, or who may have questions like this. I hope this has helped you. If it has, please don't forget to drop a like on the video, and I'd love to see you in the future one.